All right, so I was scrolling down the other day, April 30th, and on CNN they had this article about, I believe it was pronounced Leicester City, and how they could win the Premier League and whatnot. And I really don't watch soccer, football, whatever you want to call it. But that article on CNN, the way it was headlined, just kind of caught my eye. It said that they were one win away from beating the 5,000 to 1 odds. And in numerology, you don't use the 0, so it would be a lot like 51. So I just kind of looked into it a little bit. The Cleveland Cavaliers also have the huge 51 connection. Remember, Cleveland equals 51, Cleveland Cavs equals 51, LeBron James equals 51. Cleveland hasn't won a sports championship in 51 years. They also play in Quicken Loans. Quicken Loans equals 51. If you write out 51 years, it equals 69 the small way, 168 the big way. Cleveland Cavaliers, if you write that out, it equals 69 the small way, 168 the big way. So anyway, first off, the first thing I notice, I don't even watch this stuff, but they show this player here, and look, King Power. I've been mentioning tons of times, there's just been lots of coding to Prince Charles, who, if Queen Elizabeth dies, he will become King Charles III. So King Power, a Cavalier, is a follower of King Charles I during the English Civil War, and then later King Charles II and King James II, which were his sons. They were the last Catholic kings and whatnot. Pope Francis has been a huge deal in the news as well. Also connected to LeBron James with the 923. LeBron James in Jewish gematria equals 923. Tons of other stuff. Just please watch my previous videos. I'm trying to shorten this one up a little bit. So anyway, in the CNN article, what really stuck out to me was that they say, when you think that the Cleveland Browns, who are 201 to win the 2017 Super Bowl, which also Super Bowl 51, just want to point that out, they have the worst odds going into the NFL, even though unlike Leicester, it has actually won an NFL title, yes, in 1964. So they're telling you 51 years ago, the Cleveland Browns won the NFL championship or whatever. It was before the Super Bowls. But also, Super Bowl 51, they don't actually point that out, but interesting, they mentioned the Cleveland Browns, their last time they won. Then they even go on to tell you, if you want a sporting comparison which U.S. fans might be able to use as a marker, that doesn't even make any sense, but then take the New York Mets team of 1969, remember Cleveland Cavaliers equals 69, which won the World Series with a 4-1 win over the 109-win Baltimore Orioles in the biggest shocks baseball's ever seen. Alright, so New York Mets equals 51 in gematria. Also, with the S exception and the K exception, it could equal 60, 69, and 168. Cleveland Cavaliers, 69, 168. 51 years, 69, 168. Another thing that really sticks out with this is that they talk about the Mets beating the Baltimore Orioles, but in the 1964 championship game, the Cleveland Browns just so happened to beat the Baltimore Colts. So, interesting, they mention 4 teams in 2 different sports leagues, and they're talking about Cleveland and also talking about Baltimore. Also interesting, they were the Baltimore Colts. Colts equals 69, just like Cleveland Cavaliers. We just had the Freddie Gray stuff last year in 2015 and whatnot. Freddie Gray was arrested on April 12th, and then he died on April 19th. The Civil War began on April 12th, 1861, in South Carolina, and the first death of the Civil War was on April 19th. It was in Baltimore, so interesting, Freddie Gray arrested, then dies on that day. He dies in Baltimore. You even have Prince, who on his very final album, the very first song on it is even titled Baltimore. And the song was in regards to the deaths of Freddie Gray and Michael Brown. Also interesting to point out, it's 4 minutes 34 seconds long. I'll mention that again in a little bit, but just remember the 4:34 with Prince's song Baltimore. Also, I've been talking about the English Civil War and whatnot, because King Charles I was executed in 1649. Remember, the Cavaliers are followers of King Charles I. The English Civil War came to an end in the year 1651, and then his two sons were banished and then left or whatever to France, but then later came back to be the kings again. And then if Queen Elizabeth dies, her son, Prince Charles, will become the new king of the UK or England or however you want to say it. But he will be King Charles III. So he'll be the third rendition of the King Charles. Queen Elizabeth II in Gematria also equals 168, just like Cleveland Cavaliers. Anyway, as I was researching, and I need to go through and try to understand it, get a better understanding of it. It all goes back to like the 30 Years' War and tons of stuff that I was never taught as a kid or never taught in school. I mean, maybe for one, because, I'm not from England or, the UK or whatever. But they don't teach you this stuff. I don't know that much about it. I've just been researching a lot. But moral of the story, need to go back. But this guy, Lord Baltimore, since they were showing Baltimore or whatever, now he was responsible for King Charles I, who is also King James' son or whatever, the guy who made the King James Bible. But he was responsible for King Charles I to marry a Spanish royal. But in the end, Charles ended up marrying a French Catholic named Henrietta Maria. And what sticks out to me about that is that Maryland, where Baltimore is from, is actually named in honor of Henrietta Maria, his wife. And this guy lived in Maryland and whatnot. Just before he died, there was a charter or whatever for the settlement of Maryland. It ended up being passed on to his son, who was also Baron Baltimore. He's the second Baron Baltimore. So just interesting, this guy connected to Maryland, obviously with the Baltimore, but it's also connected to King Charles I, who the Cavaliers are connected to. Also, Baltimore connected to the Civil War in the United States. So 2 civil wars. This guy dies on April 15th, the same day that Abraham Lincoln dies. He even dies in Lincoln's Inn Field. I mean, pretty strange. So, like I said, I need to go back because I'm not completely sure of the whole significance of why he was trying to marry a Spanish royal or whatever, and then he ended up marrying a French royal. I'm not exactly sure the whole significance of that. It's a lot to take in when you have never learned it in your entire life. There's just a lot to know. So, anyway, Baron Baltimore, Jewish Gematria equals 470. Some of these other ones I found interesting. Trump equals 470. Russia. Toronto, that's where the NBA All-Star Week was. I've talked about this back-to-back theme. Back-to-back in Gematria equals 69, just like the Cleveland Cavaliers. The small way. Drake came out with the song Back-to-Back. Drake, the big fan or whatever of the Toronto Raptors. Toronto hosted the NBA All-Star Week this year, where Zach LaVine won back-to-back slam dunk contests. Russell Westbrook won back-to-back All-Star Game MVPs. Also, the word sports equals 470. This article on CNN also mentions that Leicester has been almost unstoppable since the reburial of King Richard III. And so basically it says the body of Richard III, the last English king to be killed in battle in 1485. Then his tomb was raided or whatnot, and then they thought they found it. They're pretty sure they found his body, so they reburied him. Whatever. Moral of the story, this guy reburied on May 26th or March 26th of 2015. Leicester ends up winning the Premier League on 5-2 this year. A span of 1 month, or 1 year, 1 month, and 6 days after. The reason that they won was because this team right here, Tottenham Hotspur, they had to win this game, but they ended up tying the game. But Tottenham Hotspur tied the game, so Leicester wins. Tottenham in Gematria equals 116. And then, they won 116 days after the reburial of King Richard III. And that's how that article basically says they've been on fire since then. So 116, they won because this team lost or tied 116. Also, the 434 here in Jewish Gematria, just like Prince's song Baltimore. Also, what really sticks out to me, look at this team's name. Tottenham Hotspur. In regards to the San Antonio Spurs and whatnot. They even called them the Spurs in one of the articles I was reading. They didn't call them the Hotspur, they just shortened it up and called them the Spurs. So who knows, I've talked a lot about the Warriors and whatnot and all this back-to-back stuff, but I've talked about how the back-to-back connects to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I've also mentioned a lot to do with Steve Kerr and how Steve Kerr played for the Cavaliers. He also played for the Chicago Bulls, the 72-win Chicago Bulls and whatnot. He also won 4 championships in a row because after the second three-peat, he went to San Antonio and he won the championship there. Then he won it again the same year that Michael Jordan retired. Tyronn Lue, the Cleveland Cavaliers coach, even played on that team. He was the starter along with Michael Jordan on the Washington Wizards. The last game was against the Philadelphia 76ers. Philadelphia just absolutely coded to a lot of this. Also, in regards to Steve Kerr in Gematria equals 51. Another interesting thing, the score was 2-2. I've mentioned a lot about this 79 connection. Champion equals 79. The 22nd prime is 79. YouTube copyright struck my video about 22 Jump Street. So, who knows? Just lots of 22 with 79 coding and whatnot. Champion, like I said, equals 79. Anyway, Tottenham Hotspur Gematria. Just so happens to equal 233. 233 just so happens to be the 51st prime number. Wouldn't you know? They tied and they didn't win or whatever. And they played Chelsea. Chelsea sticks out because Chelsea at Jewish Gematria, 132. Leicester, however you say it, they have not won ever in the Premier League in their 132 years of existence. So just pointing out 132 years, they win in 132 years because the team Chelsea, who equals 132, ended up tying the Tottenham Hotspur. 132 is also connected to the 51, Antonin Scalia. The small way equals 51. The big way equals 132. He died on the 44th day of the year. The Warriors super connected to 44. The date numerology was 51. I've even mentioned this 132 in regards to the day that David Blatt, the Cavs coach, got fired. It was on January 22nd, also the same day Steve Kerr came back. On the 44th game of the season, the Warriors won with 122 points. Golden State equals 122. But if you go to the first day of the NBA Finals, it's a span of 132 days. Also 4 months, 11 days. The word assassin equals 411. JFK died at 411 Elm Street. Also in regards to Antonin Scalia, I talked about the judge theme. And there was a Texas judge that got shot outside of her house on November 6th in Texas or whatever. Her name equals 51 in Gematria as well. Obama nominated Merrick Garland on this day. It was to replace Antonin Scalia 132 days after this judge got shot on 11/6. Remember, Tottenham equals 106. Also, Leicester City had been on fire since the reburial of King Richard III. 1 year, 1 month, 6 days before, a lot like the 116. Also, in regards to Antonin Scalia, it just kind of sticks out to me. I don't know how it's completely connected, why judges would be connected to this or whatever, but he died on the 44th day of the year, which is also the first day of Lupercalia. It's a day where they celebrate and sacrifice a wolf. It's a 3-day festival. But Leicester or whatever is, they're the foxes, right? Foxes in Gematria equals 60 died, just like Cleveland Cavaliers. And the movie, The Fantastic Mr. Fox, that stars George Clooney. George Clooney's in the movie Money Monster that's coming out on Friday the 13th, May 13th. I've talked a lot about that day in the last couple weeks and whatnot. But the Paris attacks happened on November 13th, 2015, which was also Friday the 13th. This year, May 13th is the only Friday the 13th of the year or whatever. But this movie, Fantastic Mr. Fox, came out on November 13th, 2009, so exactly 6 years before the Paris attacks. And in this movie, they make a big deal. There's a whole big deal about the gray wolf and how important the gray wolf is and how amazing the gray wolf is and whatnot. It's a total tribute to Lupercalia and whatnot. And these guys are foxes, right? So they're like dogs, but they're not as good as the gray wolf. Also, the reason Lupercalia is so special is because the wolf or whatever, supposedly it's in celebration of the she-wolf who suckled Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. But supposedly, the Romulus and Remus supposedly founded the city April 21st, 753 BC. Interesting day for them to find it, especially in regards to this year or just all of the coding going on. Queen Elizabeth II, born on April 21st. Prince dies on April 21st. Purple's the royal color. Prince, all about purple raid and whatnot. So who knows, just sticks out to everything I've been talking about. Last thing I want to add, I guess, is King Power here. King Power in Gematria equals 118. I've talked a lot about this day as well in regards to the Cavaliers and the Warriors. The Warriors defeated the Cavs by 34 points on January 18th. It was 34 Cavs games after LeBron shot 9 of 23. Lots of other stuff I've mentioned in previous videos, but the word death also equals 118. In Jewish Gematria, death equals 118. And I previously talked about David Blatt coming back 132, or David Blatt getting fired 132 days before the NBA Finals began and whatnot. The reason that he was supposedly fired was because of the loss on January 18th. So, I'm not sure what it all means, but they keep coding the same stuff over and over. Definitely coding Lupercalia. Definitely coding the royal family. They're putting it, into sports and whatnot, especially the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron James just absolutely connected. His name in every form of Gematria fits with every one of these little underlying stories that goes. But yeah, I'm going to try to make it short, quit rambling, so have a good night.